मुबारक के हवाले से और बच्चों की तरबियत और तालीम के हवाले से और जो मुख्तलिफ टॉपिक्स हैं जो यूथ से रिलेटेड हैं, क्योंकि माशाल्लाह आप भी यहाँ पे यूथ को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं. And I think you born and raised in New Jersey.
Yes.
So you know all these aspect of the broad kid in United States.
Yeah.
First of all, Assalamu alaikum Maulana.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So Maulana is right now giving speeches to Markazi Mambarga Al Murtada in a youth session every day, and he has a very good follow-up I can say in the youth. So Maulana, welcome to the Mahfil Velayat in Houston, also in Velayat TV. So Maulana, if you want to say something about the importance of Ramadan al-Mubarak, especially the last Ashra, or what I can say, like we have 4 more days in Ramadan. So please, Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم والصلاة والسلام على أهل البيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين المكرمين لا سيما على بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لترى بمقدمه الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. Thank you again very much for the invitation, and to all the mu'mineen, mu'minat listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
Alaikum
barakatuh.
assalam wa rahmatullah.
The month of Ramadan is coming to a close. It's coming to an end very, very soon. So we have, today is Sunday, we have leftover of today, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and possibly Thursday, Friday. So 4 or 5 days, maybe 3-4 days, that's it.
3 or 4 days.
So the month of Maghfirah, the month of Rahmah, month of Kirama, all this is coming to a close very soon. So one of the things that I should remind myself, and then everybody else who's listening, for all of us, is typically whenever we come in the month of Ramadan, the first time we come to the center, that first speech that Zakir or the Alim gives, it's always about the introductory points of the month of Ramadan. It's the Fazail, what's the Fadila of Shahr Ramadan. So they give an introduction, what's the benefits of fasting, roza, all these different things. And of course, when we hear it that first time, it has a big, big effect. And it makes a lot of sense. We say, subhanallah, va, va, va. I say, yeah, it's good. But then as the days go on, then that memory of what we heard in that first day leaves us very quickly. Maybe the first, second day, first week, you remember what the speaker has mentioned in his speeches. And then when we move on, week after week, towards the end, then we get strengthened again at Laylatul Qadr. It's almost like Allah realized that human beings, they say the reason sometimes some of the ulama say humans are called insan, because from that root word is nasiya, to forget, because we're forgetful creatures, right? And that's why also Allah says فَذَكِّرْ إِن نَفَعَتِ ذِكْرًا. Remind people, because sometimes reminding is beneficial. So it's almost like we always have all these different occasions in the month of Ramadan. Wiladat, right? Imam Hassan alayhi salam. We have the shahadats, wafats, all these different things happening. So that anytime a person might forget, then something happens, whether it's a happy occasion or a sad occasion. And then of course we come towards the end of Laylatul Qadr, all these different nights. And whether you believe it's 19th, 21st, 23rd, or any of the other days, that's a different argument, different debate. But the point is that usually, especially in a race, it's always about that last amount of effort you put at the end, right? You usually start off very strong, people who run marathons, things like that. After that first initial start, they run off very quickly. Then in that middle, then they get tired and they feel sluggish. But then towards the end, then they see the destination, they see the finish line. And if they really have that taqat, if they have that quwwat and that strength, they see their destination, then they can move forward and reach that goal. So for the advice for us, since we know that in a few days, this month is going to end, everything is going to come to a close, Allah, out of His mercy, His grace, His lutf, has given us a few more days to live. A few more days that, don't be burdened with fasting. See it as you're losing a benefit in a few days. And some of us, when the month of Ramadan comes, we complain. And when it leaves, we say, all right, it's almost over, good. But it should be the other way around, right? We should see it as when the month of Ramadan comes, it's good because I get to now spiritually purify. This tazkiyah. And when it's about to leave, I see that now this spiritual training month that Allah has given us, now it's about to leave. So we should be saddened by this. Some other different points we can also remember is, just like we always hear from all the different speakers, shaitan is locked up, right? So one point that we remember is, perhaps one of the reasons why the month of Ramadan and fasting is so special is because maybe every other time of the year we can use the excuse of, shaitan whispered, it was whispers. That's what made me do this haram thing, or didn't make me pray on time, or I don't pray hijab because so-and-so reason, for example. But in the month of Ramadan, what excuse does a person have left? What do we have left to say? Well, can you say shaitan? If you look at the Velayat, if you say literally that this literal red horn guy, shaitan, is locked up. He's in Guantanamo maybe, I don't know. He's locked up somewhere. If you believe that, then okay, then what's your excuse for not staying away from what's haram, not doing what's wajib, not being a true and proper mu'min in Shia? What's the excuse left? So Allah is saying now that I've removed the biggest obstacle you could say. So now all that's left is you and your nafs.
Your nafs.
So what's the biggest way to combat the nafs? Now, if Allah wanted to leave it up to us to decide, then He would have left it up to us to say, okay, this holy month, just be a better mu'min.
Better moment.
Instead, He says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, kutiba alaykum as-siyam. If you have iman, then I'm already prescribing for you the medicine that you need. If you're trying to, لَعَلُّكُمْ وَلَاتِيَنْ لَعَلُّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. If you want taqwa, which is the goal for all of us, obviously, then I've already given you the prescription. You don't need to read the Quran over and over and over again. You don't need to look through all the riwayat. It's very simple. Allah's told us exactly what you have to do. Just like كَمَا كُتُبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. Just like the people of the past, the same thing. Jews, Christians, Buddhists, Confucius, Chinese, the Greeks, the old Spartan warriors, everybody used to fast. This was something which was cleansing spiritually, physically, emotionally. So Allah is saying, for this reason, use this.
So Maulana, sorry to interrupt you, but this is a good time to ask this question. So what is the difference between the, let's we call it Roza. So what is the difference between the same ritual they are doing, Christian and Jewish, by the name of, we can call it fasting. So what is the difference between the Jewish fasting and our Roza? There's a difference, or they have the same? I'm asking this question for our kids.
Sure.
So if somebody asks them, especially we living in the United States or Europe, might be some Christian or Jewish ask this question to our youth. And so if they get answer from you, they can give that answer to their fellow students, or they are working somewhere and then they can ask their co-workers. Somebody asks, what is fasting? So they can relate that fasting of Christian and Jewish to the Muslim concept of the Roza.
Right.
Please, Maulana.
So obviously fasting is a concept which is understood in the West,
Understood,
all
yes.
around the
All
world.
around the
Everybody
world.
knows what
That's
fasting
right.
means, right? Just basically the literal definition is just to abstain, specifically food and drink. So, and as we were saying before, many other different faiths and even non-monotheistic faiths,
yes.
besides Jews and Christians, other religions have practiced this.
Yes.
And one thing I brought up as well, and I've read, is that the old Greek warriors, the Spartan warriors, they used to fast before battle.
Oh.
They said in these previous wars that they had, when the Greeks used to fight the old Persians, that once the Greeks, the Spartans, would use that as a source of victory. They would fast before battle, and then they would give them more strength. When the Persians would start losing, they would start fasting in response to get the victory back on their side.
Oh.
So it became a source of strength.
So make yourself like a discipline.
Yeah.
Make more strong.
Exactly. Yeah.
Source
Physical
of
strengthening, morale boost, everything. So because if they saw that we can keep away from all of this simple food and drink, then the next time we go and do this, we'll have much more strength behind it.
Okay.
Now, as far as Jews and Christians and other faiths, our brothers in the Ahlul Kitab at least, for them, there's some little differences here and there. The Jewish people, we're probably the closest as far as fasting is for them. But there are major differences. One of them, and again, I'm not a scholar of the Jewish faith, so I can't give you that.
I'm just giving the...
But just generally, typically, they don't have, we're the only faith which has a whole month
fasting.
Specifically for fasting, meaning wajib.
Wajib.
It might be wajib for them, I'm not exactly sure, but on Yom Kippur, right? On that day, they fast, and for them it's more of a tawbah for their sins. It's fasting as an atonement. Kind of, I feel sorry for the sins I've committed, and this is the way to take care of that. So it's just a one-day thing, and they do it, it's about a 24 or 25-hour fast, from sundown one night to sundown the next night. So it would be like, if for the same understanding for us, it would be like from about Maghrib to the next Maghrib. So and it's only, again, one day for them, and there's some other days. So for them, there's usually some sort of gham or bala, like a sadness, a depression that's associated with it. Christians, also there's a little bit of that as well. But for them, they don't necessarily abstain from everything. Like for Lent, for 40 days, on the Friday of every day in Lent, they stay away from meat. Or on certain days, and different Christians will practice it differently depending on if they're Orthodox.
Soft food.
Yeah, some of them will say just don't have meat, small meals, they change things. One friend that I used to have in New Jersey, he told me that basically their church had allowed them to pick what you want to stay away from in Lent. So he said, I'm staying away from vanilla ice cream for Lent. So I kind of joke with him. I said, so you guys said Jesus died for you, for your sins, so you're staying away from vanilla ice cream for him dying for you. So it was a weird concept for us. But, it was good that they wanted to do something, I suppose. So I guess if we're getting into discussions with other individuals, we could say, physically it's going to have the same effect if you stay away from food and drink. But for us, the whole point is to get closer to Allah, and closer to God, which is something that at least Jews and Christians and other monotheistic faiths, that we all have in common. So it's something we can bridge the gap with. But for other things like, if you're married, relations with, husband and wife, that's something which other faiths technically allow when you're fasting, but we don't. Inhaling large amounts of dust, smoking, we don't allow that. And the major thing that other people, sometimes we forget too, is if you lie about Allah, lie about the Prophet or the Imams, like lie about a hadith, for example, that's something which breaks your fast as well. So these other things which tie into somebody so that they can look inward, so that's the whole idea of taqwa. You start focusing on yourself, your thoughts, you purify them and realize, my nafs, I have to destroy that. The animal within me has to go, and I have to understand to be a divine creature, become madharullah, manifest Allah's names. And that's something that maybe we do, I'll say in our belief, we do that better than other religions do.
So please carry on. That's my question.
No, that's no problem. Okay. So some other points we can think about is, when it comes to fasting, obviously every speaker always mentions to us that fasting is different levels, right? As we were talking about before. Fasting, just like even if you have to go for a medical operation, surgery, if you have to take a blood test, then you have to fast, right? For cholesterol tests, for example. Don't eat, don't drink, because it messes up the test. Now, if the niyat is not there for a good reason, then it's just a nutritional fast. It's just a diet fast. It doesn't have the full effect. Now that's why we say that there's a difference between a physical fast and a spiritual fast. Big, big difference. So anybody, somebody wants to lose weight, they can do that. And sometimes that's why some people look forward to the month of Ramadan, right? Because they say, no, I'm going to lose a few pounds, which in our communities doesn't really happen anyway, because they have 20 pakora every night anyway, so it's not going to happen.
Extra food.
Yeah, they have more food than the other months. So
more food than the regular days.
Yeah, so that's one problem. And if you think about why that happens, one side point, we think, and this is because we don't understand how our human body works. We don't understand, and this is maybe one of the blessings and wisdoms Allah is trying to get us to understand. We think that, okay, for so many hours, 14, 15, 16 hours, now I'm not eating or drinking or doing anything. So maybe I wake up for suhoor, for sehri. I have to stuff myself, eat as much as I can, drink as much water as I can. Then as the day goes on, I feel that hunger pangs, the rumbling in the stomach, all this. I feel tired and weak. And then once the iftari time comes close, then I feel ready. I'm like, okay, now I have to eat and make up for all that time I didn't eat. So they come, they stuff their face. 2, 3, 4 glasses of water, 2 cups of chai, plates and full. And what happens? They think that they made up for everything because of the weakness. But usually, everybody who does that, they feel horrible afterwards. So the problem is that we haven't learned to combat that mental waswasa, the nafs that's saying, you have to make up for this lost time. Whether it's food, whether it's sleep, if you study, any doctor will tell you this, you can't make up for loss of food. You can't make up for loss of sleep. It doesn't work like that. And that's why especially that, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salam always instructed us, for somebody who's trying to get closest to Allah, less sleep is better, less food is better. And this gives you more of a connection with your mind. It increases your learning capacity. It increases your memory capacity. You become a more concentrated individual. And this is something that even medical science now is giving us evidence to, that yes, when your stomach is clear, your mind is clear. There's one narration, for example, from that they say comes from Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farshun. Who says, if I remember correctly, كيف تصفو فكرة من يستديم شيب. How can somebody do sifai? How can they clean their fikr, their thinking, their mind, من يستديم شيب, while they're constantly full? Meaning he's saying that, if this is a authentic narration, he's saying that if somebody's full of food all the time, they can't clear their thoughts. They won't be able to do tafakkur properly. They can't contemplate and think about things. Again, medically, you'll see that's the way it is. But the major point here is that when you're full of food, one idea that a person can understand, when you fill yourself up, physically now the science suggests that now more energy has to be expanded for the body to react to that food and digest it. That blood circulation, that energy that you would have had before, now can't be used for concentration, for thinking, for memorization, concentration, focus, things like that. So if a person reduces the amount of food and sleep, things like that they have, that energy that they have, physical, spiritual, can be concentrated on other ibadah. That's the main thing. That's why Allah says, in addition to fasting, increase everything else. Dhikr Allah, Quran, extra namazes that you have, extra prayers that you can recite. Read more of your fiqh. Everything else that you should have been doing all throughout the year, if you didn't do it then at least do it now. That's why if you ask most people, if they can't memorize like short surahs in the rest of the year, if they try just a little bit in this month, then they'll have a much, much easier time doing so.
So you think that the roza is also affecting the human body plus the human ruhaniyat, the spiritual healings, or recovering all the if you have a nafs and you have somehow you damage your nafs and you also damage your ruh.
Yeah.
That's it. So roza is also not doing one thing, like your body means effect on your body means when you have a roza, so you're also correcting the elements of the body plus also the ruhaniyat, spiritual, and you are more closer to the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you go to the namaz and different amal in month of Ramadan, so it's also clean up your body plus your boosting your morals and the spiritual healings. So do you want to say something about your character building in the month of Ramadan?
Akhlaq has obviously the highest of values. Somebody had come to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they had mentioned that there's some lady, one of his companions came to the Prophet and said, I know this lady, her fasting, she always does, either mustahab and of course the wajib. She prays constantly. She's always reciting Quran. She's doing all of these different ibadat. But when she speaks to us, she speaks to her neighbors, she's very, very rude. Her tongue is very sharp. And then the Prophet responded, alayka nar. Upon her, meaning wajib on her, is going to be hellfire. Because when akhlaq is not there to back up the actions, then your actions are basically a waste. They go down the drain. So now, I don't want to discount, of course, the ibadah that a person should do. In addition, when the Prophet was giving a sermon in the masjid once, Imam Ali alayhi salam was present, and he was the Prophet was mentioning all the different fada'il, the virtues of the month of Ramadan. So in the middle, Imam Ali alayhi salam interrupted, or at the end he asked a question. He said, ma afdalu a'mal fi hadha shahr. What's the best amal, what's the best action you can do in this month? The best thing you can do. And he says, Ya Abul Hassan, oh Imam Ali, ya father of Hassan, afdalu a'mal fi hadha shahr. The best amal, the best action you can do in this month is al-war'u an maharamillah. The best thing you can do is keep away from the haram things that Allah has said. Whatever is forbidden, keep away from that. So of course that is definitely the best. And that benefits physically and spiritually, of course, just like fasting. And of course fasting aids with a person wanting to do that. Now, again, like we're going back to the point of akhlaq. When akhlaq is concerned, you see, sometimes we make ibadat the goal, and that's a problem. Sometimes people become so paband in namaz, very, very to the point. Especially right in the month of Ramadan, everybody's like, 8:31, now we start right away. The rest of the year, they don't care what time Maghrib is, but when it comes to iftar, you have to know exactly the point. So, being on time is very good. But when the akhlaq doesn't come with it, like there's one famous saying from, they attribute to Imam Khomeini, rahmatullah alayh. He said, one time some of his students, they saw him, he prayed namaz very, very quickly. He was somebody that, he paid attention to his namaz.
Yeah.
His namaz was one of the best namazes. Very slow, he would cry in his namaz, had a lot of fikr, a lot of deep spirituality in there. So when they saw him reading it fast, they said, why did you do that? And it was because and then he gave this famous remark. He said, the prayer starts when the prayer ends.
Oh.
Now, think deeply about this. Any person can read on time, and then that's it, walk away from it. But to actually get an effect from that dialogue you're having with Allah, that's something different. Another example we can think about. Let's say a father comes home from work, right? Maybe he's tired, he doesn't want to go to the center. So he comes back, he sits down, he offers his maghrib on time. Very good, right? So he does that, then he sits and reads Quran. And he's deep, he's involved, maybe he's even crying because of that khushu and that humility. Then maybe a young child comes, his son or daughter comes and says, Baba, Abu, asks a question. And while he's deep and crying after praying, he's like, get away from me, I'm trying to read Quran. He's missed the point completely. And of course, this could happen to mother as well, or anybody. But the point I'm trying to get across is that if they didn't make that connection and build the akhlaq, build that connection with Allah, especially this khushu, this humility, then they've missed the point completely. And sometimes we've been making the ibadat the goal. Namaz is the goal. Roza is the goal. Hajj is the goal. No, there's an effect that should come away from all of this. That you build your akhlaq, your character from it, right? Khushu, again, humility is one thing. Being able to understand that your status in the eyes of Allah, you're nothing.
Nothing,
yes.
What
are you? And that's why one of the signs of an abd that one of the imams gives, he gives 10 different signs. But he says one of the signs is that whenever you come into contact with any other individual, you should be able to say, Huwa khayrun minni. He is better than me. Even if a kafir, that's something very, very tough. Imagine you meet a kafir, atheist, somebody who doesn't believe in Allah. Can you have the level of humility to say that maybe this person gives more charity than me? Maybe he takes care of his parents better than I do. Maybe he's more patient with people than I am. That's a tough thing to do. These types of actions should build our patience, should build our level of love with Allah, to make us understand that Allah gives His rahmah to all creation, and we have to start to do that as well. So akhlaq in this month means that in addition to building our patience to not being able to eat and drink, we should have that same patience with the other individuals. People go to work all the time, or they go to school. And what happens? Sometimes, which is not the right thing to do, is we become worse in our akhlaq, right? We become impatient, we become very rude, and we use fasting and roza as an excuse.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry I got mad with you, I'm fasting.
Yeah.
And then what happens? This person's going to say, well, fasting is not going to give you a benefit, it's a bad idea. If it makes you angrier, what benefit is it?
I don't want to do this because I'm in the fasting.
Yeah, exactly. It should be the other way. Somebody should say, wow, you have so much more patience than before. How is that? It's because I'm fasting.
Fasting, yeah.
It should be the other way around. So if we could learn to do those things, somebody focus on themselves, again, destroy that nafs, destroy the animal, then they'd be able to, be patient. And you can start from your own house. When your children, young children who aren't fasting and they're eating, build patience with them, right? When they're, annoying you and nagging you about food and other things, build that patience and say that they deserve love, they deserve that patience. So that's one we can start doing that.
So your akhlaq should be getting better in the month of Ramadan.
Of course, absolutely.
And your nafs going to be controlled. And if you can do this for 1 month, why not you can do for the whole year? 11 more years,
exactly.
11 more months. So I have one more question, because this is a great opportunity to ask this question. Because you are born and raised in United States of America, especially you are in New Jersey, and you were born and raised here. So what the kind of I can say what thing motivates you to become a alim deen, or you are more closer to be a alim? So what is the best I can say, give the example to the different people, what is the best inspiration you get from somebody that you become not going for a doctor or engineer or another professions, and going towards the alim deen profession? You're sorry to say, that's from your family, your mother and father side, or you decide that I'm going to be an alim deen?
Oh, I decided I was going to be a student of Islam, right?
Okay.
Alim is something which is...
No, we can say alim, but kasra nafsi, you are doing the kasra nafsi, I can say that.
No, I'm just a student right now studying, but...
What make you motivated to do this?
Obviously, without giving credit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I would be doing an injustice. So if I were to say it was for myself, this would be a big lie, and it would be doing a disgrace to Allah. So Allah chooses which type of inspiration, which type of hidayat He wants to put in the eyes of different individuals. So even for me to pinpoint exactly where it happened, it's very tough. But in my older brother, for example, he was always very religious from when he was very young, middle school, high school. So he had been trying to encourage me and my younger brother and the rest of my family to be more religious. Now my father, my mother, they were also very madhabi, muttaqi, religious as well.
That's good.
Now one thing is, obviously I've grown up in, my parents have a Desi background. So my background is obviously a Desi background. Although I've been raised here, the typical cultural upbringing of a Desi child, that's what I have. And I don't want to get into the points of the culture, good and bad, let's leave that out. But obviously for the majority of Desi children, there's a specific way that they're taught. Not everybody, but there's a specific way that the tarbiyat is done in a Desi household. So what happens typically is that in a lot of these households, and again, it's not everywhere, but some places, the training that comes is usually that you have to read namaz, or for example, you might go to hell. You have to do this, or Allah won't, He'll punish you. So when it's meant to be reward, punishment, hell, heaven, this type of thing, this usually doesn't agree with the fitrah very well. Because naturally Allah has put in our fitrah that He is Ghaffar, Rahim, Rahman. So when we hear like, oh, He's going to punish for all this, then it doesn't match up with what's in your heart. But sometimes people start moving away from that. Young children will move away like that. What happened is later on, by the grace of Allah, I happened to hear different speakers who provided more of a logical basis for Islam. So I would hear different proofs from them, and that got me interested a little bit. Then I started doing a little bit more of my own research and started to see that, okay, Islam does have a logical basis to it. And actually this is usually when I go and lecture in different communities, the main series that I try to do is this. And that's what we're doing at Al-Murtaza as well. Is that most people, even elders sometimes, if somebody were to come to you and say, what do you Muslims believe? Say, listen, well, the first part of our kalama is La ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I believe that there is no God but one God, Allah. Okay, now if an atheist comes and says, well, can you prove that? Can we do that? A point they say in education and psychology is, if you can't teach that back, do you really know it?
No idea.
Maybe inside deeply I say,
first you learn and then you preach.
And it's very tough. Again, I'm not trying to reduce somebody's morale and try to make them depressed, but this is something that we all have to do, this kind of introspection, tafakkur. Realize, somebody asks you at work, at school, say, why do you believe in one God? I don't see Him, I don't hear Him, He never guided me, why am I suffering? All these questions that everybody has, but more importantly, we as Muslims, even Shias in our households, we have these questions. It's a good and bad reason that sometimes young, old Shias come and they give questions which are, again, I'm going to put as, I don't want to say low level, but very simplistic ones which have been answered by the imams, answered by ulama, in the books, in like the first chapters. But because sometimes we haven't learned them, haven't read these books, then we don't have those things. And there's one famous narration that they say comes from Imam Ali alayhi salam, and it talks about building your iman. He says, أَفْضَلُ iman husnu iqan. That the best kind of iman comes from yaqeen. Yaqeen yani, you should have certitude in what you believe. If I don't have even certainty in tawheed, how will I understand adl? How will I understand nabuwat? How will I understand wilayat and imamat? How am I going to understand qiyamat? And then if I don't understand the usul, why would I have the energy to go practice the furu? So these things, when I first actually listened and read the proof of tawheed, that the only proof of existence is that there is one God. That changed everything for me. I said, okay, now I understand that something has to change in my life. In the same way that a young child, when the first time he touches a hot cup of chai, or he puts his hand on the stove, immediately now in his brain, a whole different system has registered. Now he knows, if I touch that again, I'm going to get burnt. So if I want to keep my hand away from this pain, I won't do that. And this is the analogy that we always give to our youth, right? Don't do haram things because you might get burned. But it's deeper than that, is you have to build the love before you build the hate. And that love you build from proving Tawheed first before you say, well, Allah is going to punish you. We started Qiyamat when we should start at Tawheed, right? We always teach our kids Allah Ek, right? We always make them say that when they're young. And that's good, but make sure the proofs come with that as well. And so as I started to go through all of these different things, then I increased in understanding the proofs. I went from each one. And then up to a point, every time I met an alim, somebody who came, who would, speak in our communities, I would try to sit down with them and ask the questions that I couldn't find in books. Because obviously not too much has been translated in English. So I'd ask them all the questions that I've been thinking out. I'd had a book, I would write down questions and answers as much as possible. And one alim had said to me, he's like, listen Hassan, I know you very well. These questions you have are good questions. And we both know that I can give you the answer, but this answer is not going to be sufficient for you. It won't be kafi. Why? Because especially for people in the West like you, this type of question and answer, it's going to be very, very superficial.
Very superficial.
Very superficial. When you hear the answer, it might not be deep in your heart. Sometimes it takes the aql is one part, but the dil, your heart needs to understand it as well. So he said, you need to start researching it as well. You need to come to it through the books, research it, understand the different perspectives. So he said, if you go through the Hawza program, you can start doing that. But more importantly, all the other youth who have the same questions and issues, you can provide them the answers in the same way that they could be taught. Because somebody from an alim from India or Pakistan or Iraq or Iran, for example, they might have the answer, but they might not have the way of presenting it in proper English. They might know English, I think they might have been taught English, but to use the right analogies might be a difficult thing for them. So again, because I've been born and raised here, there's a certain way that I can use English differently than somebody else has. So, and because I've gone to all my schooling here, obviously I've done my bachelor's here as well. So the experience I have, somebody can say to an alim who, for example, who's been built up in a family of ilm, they could say, well, my parents never listened to music. So when they try to tell somebody in a community, don't listen to music, the kid could say, well, why would I believe you? You don't even know anything about music. But I've grown up here. My friends were, in music. So I've been surrounded in this culture. So I can tell them, I know the understanding of what it takes to fight these kinds of things. So it gives me, I guess, a leg up a little bit. Maybe. I don't know.
For our youths who's listening to this program, watching this program, if you have any questions about any aspect that Maulana said, so please call us and ask any question. Maulana, we have one caller. He texts me a question, so I can read it and ask you the question. See, the brother asks, what is the importance of language, especially living in the United States? How important is to have English speakers in our centers more often to teach the right path of Islam to our youth and other who can't understand other languages? हमारे एक भाई का सवाल है, brother text me. So what do you think the importance of English speakers in our centers? What are their roles, or how important is that?
Well, obviously, English has a role. Language plays a role, just like we were saying a few minutes ago. The majority of Muslims in this country, their language is English. Now, obviously, from our background, my parents, obviously, the generation of of the Islam that came in here was an immigrant Islam. Obviously, we understand that, so their first language is not English. And there's a culture that's with it. And we shouldn't have a desire to get rid of that too. A cultural identity is a very strong part of us, right? And we should learn the cultures and the language where we came from. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, as long as it's within the boundaries of Sharia, it's fine and it's good. And our ulama have always encouraged us to do that. But the main thing is for an individual to get close to Allah and to understand his duties to the Imam of the time. And in wisdom, as far as hikmat is concerned, what's the best way to do that? Now, when I was a kid, I sat in majalis in New Jersey, and when I was young, they didn't have English when I first went to majalis. So it was in Urdu. And sometimes the zakireen or the ulama that they got, their Urdu was, it was tough. So, and sometimes I think
sometimes we don't understand the words.
Sometimes the others don't understand either. And sometimes they think that just by sitting in it, you can learn a language. Maybe a genius can do that, but I couldn't do that. And I don't think that generally most kids can do that. There's some points maybe they could get. But when it comes to deep concept that needs to be understood, again, like Tawheed, or these questions about suffering, why this, why that, why do we have to do this and that, those things need to be answered in the language that they're most comfortable with, Because in that same way, they need to give this answer to those they're going to deal with. Their classmates, their people they go to school with, whatever it's college, your people you go to work with, anybody like that, your colleagues, coworkers. So having English in a center is definitely very important. Now, some people have the ideology of get rid of the other language. Well, that's not necessary. There shouldn't be a conflict. You can have both, and there shouldn't be a problem. There's many good centers. Again, Al-Murtaza has both English and Urdu.
Both English and
most of the centers I've seen around here will have both.
Now they started the English and plus the Urdu. Yeah.
So that's very good. Sometimes they have it at the same time, to make it convenient. And sometimes because of lack of time or whatever, they have to separate the time. So again, people can come to the people in their community and ask them, we would prefer English. Is there any way we could get that? And instead of us dumping these things on top of, because sometimes we like to blame the heads of communities, the board members, etc., say, listen, I'll do the work behind it. I'll find somebody to speak in English. I'll do the research, and I'll invite him. I'll get him over here, and we'll provide the whatever we need to for this person to come, and we'll be here. And even if, let's say, the Imam Barga or the masjid doesn't have the space, doesn't have the resources, doesn't have whatever, they don't want to do it, then a person could say, listen, before or after, I'll host him at my own house. We can put in that effort if we really want it, and we can do that. So there's an importance there. We don't want to underscore it. Having your own language is good too, and if parents are interested in having their kids learn their mother tongue, Urdu, Farsi, Arabic, whatever it is, then they should teach them that language properly so that they can understand it, even the high level, which would be very good too. And they should encourage, if you have your Saturday, Sunday schools, have a good class there. They could encourage the kids to study it in their in college, if they have that ability to.
So you think that the teaching them their own mother tongue is also important?
Yeah, my Urdu is not very good, unfortunately. I spoke it, of course, because I was around it when I was a kid. But as I got older, when I was around more of my American friends, then Urdu left. So my Urdu is not very good right now. But now I realize how much importance it would have, especially in things like shairi, poetry. Poetry that I wish I could understand, I can't. And obviously, translating from especially a language like Farsi, Arabic, Urdu, it doesn't do any justice. Especially poetry. Translating it, you lose maybe 90% of the meaning.
Noha, Marsiya,
all these things. There's a way that each language is that only can be described in the words that it has. That's it. You lose it when you start to translate, because English might not have those words.
So what do you think, because you have this kind of experience, so what should the parents do to have their own, their kids can learn their mother tongue? They need to speak with them in the mother tongue, or always talk with them in Urdu, Farsi, or whatever their mother tongue is?
I think it's up to the parents to decide. Obviously, the child will learn English as they...
they go to school
anyway.
Automatically or
sometimes,
by default.
Yeah, by default. There are some times, though, when, and I have noticed in some households, again, not a generalization, but some households, when the parents speak only Urdu, then sometimes their English doesn't become as good, because when they go to, let's say, kindergarten or preschool here, there's an expectation that the child has some English knowledge. So they have sometimes a learning curve. It's a problem. So some suggestions, again, this is just a general advice. I'm not saying do this or not do this. It's a general advice that I've heard from some people, and I've seen some families do this. One parent will speak only Urdu. One parent will speak only English.
Only English. So at the same time, they can learn English and Urdu.
Yeah. Or, of course, if there is, let's say, much elder people, like, grandfathers, grandmothers, they would do only, obviously, most of them are only going to know Urdu. Keep their interactions.
Mother tongue,
So that's a good way of doing that.
Because ultimately, if we are talking about the United States of America, by default, they want to learn the English, or in the Europe, or there are different languages. But that's my, I suggest different people, don't talk with them in English, because ultimately they're going to learn the language of school or the colleges. So tell me something about your childhood, Maulana. So how difficult for you to become an Alim-e-Din in the United States of America? Because share your experience and guide some other our youth how to become a alim like you. Living in the
student, not an alim.
We can say that you are alim, but you're doing the
all the ulama will get upset that you're reducing the level of ilm.
Frankly speaking, I'm very interested, as young you are, and you have very good knowledge about Islam. So please share some difficult time and let your experience guide others to become a alim deen. So what they can do to improve their lives and become alim deen, because we need some alim deen from who born and raised here, so they can feel the difficulties that our youth has, because outside the centers is a different culture and atmosphere.
Yeah.
When we come to it's very easy to talk about the Islam in centers, and it's very hard when you talk to the different people, because nowadays Islam is under what you can say microscope, and they can pick up anything from Islam and ask the questions.
Of course.
That's why I'm asking you questions.
That's a very, very good point. You're right, and that's why these specific questions that we need to deal with. You know, a girl who starts to wear hijab in school.
Yeah.
Why are you wearing hijab?
Yeah.
My religion says so.
Yeah.
That's not a good enough
That's
answer.
yeah.
Which means that girl can't answer. Meaning she deep down has shak, which is a problem. Why do you, for example, have to keep a beard? Why this? Why do you fast? Why do you pray? All these questions. Again, why is what everybody wants to know, and this is the easiest way for us to guide people to Ahmed Bey, because naturally every insan wants to know. And the best way for us, when somebody sees that, if we can guide them to that, that's good. So as far as my childhood is concerned, again, you know, my typical Desi household, again, most of what I've seen is that, and this was the case in my house. You know, of course, alhamdulillah, you know, especially my father, my parents were very, very good and made me very disciplined about praying namaz. Of course, when you're young, most kids don't want to do it. But, you know, my father made sure if I was playing games, watching TV on the computer, whatever, okay, namaz is coming in 5-10 minutes, turn it off now. Get ready for namaz. Not sometimes we do it at the adhan time, then we go and get ready. He says, no, before namaz time, you need to start getting
preparation
ready.
of namaz.
Preparation, it's a big thing. Get yourself ready for that. So there is that big influence in the house. Obviously, always going to majalis. There was, you know, my mother always was a reciter of Nohem. My father recited as well, not in public, but, you know, by himself. In our family, both sides, people love to recite. So when I was young, I recited a little bit too. It wasn't very good, but, you know, sometimes parents like to push their kids forward to do that. So, but because I didn't understand where it was coming from, I said, I don't understand matam. I don't understand nohe. I don't understand why we come every year in the month of Muharram and do all this stuff. So when those questions aren't answered, if they don't get answered, then typically either you have two different symptoms or two different effects. One is that a person will just become a blind follower for the rest of their life. So no matter who comes and says something to them, they're going to follow it, whether it's good or bad, which is one problem. And I believe in Nahj al-Balagha, Mawla talks about that as well, alayhi salam, that most of insan, they blow like leaves in a tree.
Yes.
Go this way, that way.
But here they move here and
Move there, they move that.
Yeah.
Do this, okay, don't do it, okay, back and forth.
Back and forth.
No aql that they you know, use. On the other side, if a person's not that way, then they become completely skeptical of everything, and they don't want to go close to Islam because they didn't get the answers. And that is the biggest fear. I mean, blind following is also a problem, but so is not having these answers and being able to explain it. So our job, my job when I was younger, is to find these answers. And because there was a language gap, I couldn't get that from everybody. And some elders didn't have the opportunity. So an advice, of course, to parents is, we have to be able to humble ourselves and learn to say, I don't know, but we can do the research. We should be able to ask somebody. If there's a Mulana you have a contact with, you have wonderful shows that you can put on like this, question and answer systems, you take emails of scholars, you email them, ask them, read books, all these different things. And children are only going to want to do this if they see their parents doing it as well. If they see their parents, for example, come home and just start watching Bollywood movies and sitcoms and dramas, and, you know, overeating and oversleeping, if they don't see ilm and taqwa and, you know, being a madhabi person in them, they don't see it like that, then why would they do it? Most of the time, most girls, for example, who don't want to observe hijab, is because it was never in the household. Now, some, of course, can still do it. I'm not saying that's one reason. That's only one point. But, you know, as far as my childhood was concerned, there wasn't any, I mean, there's no ilm necessarily in my family, like nobody was a scholar or anything, but my father was very well read. So he did know a lot of answers to things, but because of our language gap, I didn't really understand all the time. And the answers he would give were something that usually Desis would understand. Another example I can give. Why is chess haram, according to some of our scholars, right? And the answer that I've always heard when I was younger is because Yazid played. I said, listen, that's not a good enough answer, because Yazid also maybe read namaz. In fact, Yazid recited poetry. By that logic, then we shouldn't recite poetry.
Yeah.
So, especially in the West where we're taught to think, somebody can answer back. And are you ready for that? And sometimes people aren't ready to say, well, I need to find the real answer. So that humility in answering.
Yeah, reason behind the something is makruh. So why is makruh? Reason behind it.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the poetry. So it's depend on what kind of poetry is that.
Exactly.
If it's in the Midhat al-Bayt, it's a jaza is unlimited. And if you're doing the poetry for something else, it's makruh, haram.
Exactly.
So same thing, very good. So please carry on, some more experience.
So, again, in school, I didn't really have an attachment to Islam, but it was just something that I did, so it didn't really have an effect on the way that I acted in my life. And again, I can't really fault my parents necessarily, because sometimes that's how their grandparents raised them, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes the way things are passed down is in a specific way. It's tough to really break that. The Quran talks about how sometimes it's the way of the forefathers which causes problems. Right? If we just keep carrying on without thinking about it, this is going to cause issues.
Because my grandfather was doing this, so I'm doing that.
Doing that, huh?
Yeah.
Why do we specifically do this? Have this kind of element? Another center does this has this kind of element? They do.
We have black and they have white.
Yeah. So these questions come up, and again, as long as it's not haram, it's okay. But there should be a way to explain it and get that across. And again, the problem is that one of the main things about humility is a person needs to be able to get to a point where they can say, "I don't know," and they shouldn't feel ashamed.
Yeah, that should
Asking
be.
I think the second Imam alayhi salam said, the first point, the first sign, the first step to ilm is sawal, is question. When you don't know, that's
if you don't know, ask somebody who knows it.
They say that that's a grace from Allah, that Allah has put a gap in your mind that you don't know. Now He's giving you the opportunity to fill it.
Fill it up.
It's a beautiful thing that we could try to do. So I'm just lucky, alhamdulillah, that for most of those questions that I've had, I've been able to make relationships with good ulama, who can go and answer these questions. And I studied with Maulana Beg for 2 years in a seminary in Florida. And he's one of those types that, he was, for most of his life, he was raised over here. So he has a good way of dealing with the youth. And of course, the people of the elder generation like him as well, So he knows what words to use. He has the wisdom to do that. So whenever I had my questions, he could teach it in a proper way, which really got me to understand. Now, of course, this was very recent, but interestingly enough, I think he was probably the first alim that came to, I was raised in, the center that I went to when I was a child was Aslan Izara in New Jersey. Maulana Beg was basically the first speaker that came and gave us English majalis. So, we started off in the basement, and then when we ran out of room, they rented a trailer for us outside. We went to a trailer, and, he gave excellent majalis, spoke our language, answered our questions, and for a lot of kids, that's what sorted them out. And one of the major things was that he introduced English Nohan. And that changed a lot of people's lives.
English Nohan.
So, there's nothing wrong with Urdu ones, but the point of connecting with the Ahlul Bayt through gham and bala and musibah is that you connect with that. What is that, what is that feeling of sadness? And it's tough for people to do in tough Urdu, right?
No.
In English, maybe you have a better connection.
The way I see the language is like you are Sayyid, I am a Sayyid. My forefathers, they came from Arab. They used to have Noha and Marsiya in Arabic. Then they moved to the Persian region, so they have Farsi, Nohas and Marsiya. When we moved to Pakistan or India, our language is Urdu. So now we move to America, so we should have English. So there's nothing wrong with the English Noha and Marsiya. So I think please carry on, share us some more information about your experiences.
I mean, again, there's the way you put it is actually really, really beautiful. People can do both. In one of the centers here, I've seen that they try to encourage both Urdu and English. Understand both of your poetry in both
languages. So I think that if we increase more like languages in English, like in America, so more kids and more youth can come forward and recite the Nohas and Manqabat in English. So Maulana, that's about the United States. And I need to ask one question about the international, what's going on right now in Sham and Pakistan. There's a lot of Shia killing in Pakistan, as well as in right now there's a big problem in Syria. So how you look to in this situation against the Shiite around the world?
The Ahlul Bayt have instructed us that when you sign up for the Velayat team, when you sign up to be our Shia, our followers, then you've also signed up to be Ahlul Bala,
Allah.
Ahlul Musiba.
Oh.
You've signed up for that. And if not, if you can't handle it, then you're on the wrong team. And they're very, very clear in their words. And obviously, they wouldn't say that unless they led that by example, right? Who has suffered more than our Ahlul Bayt? Nobody has. No, Karbala is our, that's our alam, that's our flag. That's
Yes.
why we refresh ourselves. Some might even argue that that's even more of a refresher than the month of Ramadan. Some might bring that point up. What's going on in the world, we shouldn't be surprised. This is what is going to happen. And there's two sides of it. One is obviously we're condemning exactly what's going on in the world. These targeted killings in Pakistan by these ignorant people who are using the word Islam and Muslim, but who have no idea what that word means.
Yes, sir.
They have no clue. They're using it for their own political means. Same thing with these agents, these takfiris in Syria. Same thing. All around the world, this is what's happening. Even in this country, we have the same type of mentality of individuals. And this is what happens. People want to take a certain ideology and abuse it for their own gains. A person can do whatever they want. This famous example is you take a knife, you can cut a fruit, or you can stab somebody with it.
Uh-huh.
But at the same point, you can say a flashlight, right? In a dark place, you can use it to light the way for other people, or a thief can use it to light the way into somebody's house and steal.
Somebody else steal.
So what is, even a good thing can be used for bad. So, because sometimes they don't like the knife example, so I'll use the example of a flashlight.
Light, yeah.
So again, we condemn all this stuff that's happening. But we as Shias, a part of us, again, our hearts go out to everybody there. May Allah forgive these people who are becoming shaheed in that, and cleanse them and give them the highest levels of Jannah.
Allah, yeah.
And all those people who are suffering, may Allah give their families patience and sabr, inshallah. At the same time, we, for lack of a better word, we almost welcome this. And we're saying that this is something that we are ready for. Because one thing about this is, and this might seem a little, maybe some people don't like that I'm going to say this, I don't know. So forgive me if this sounds a little offensive or you don't like that. But I think a lot of us, especially the Shias, have become too spoiled in our Islam. Again, the first point I made was that for a lot of us, we don't know what we're following anymore. We can't give the reasons. That's one problem. But if you look over time, what has happened is that gradually people have just abandoned their imam. This is why our imam is in ghaibah. After what happened, after Ghadir, then you have Saqifa. How can after the Prophet's being very, very clear, then people just abandon very, very clear words, what happens at Ghadir, then they don't want to stick to their bay'at that they gave to Imam Ali alayhi salam. People who called themselves Shias right then, who put their hand in his hand, they went away, they disobeyed the Imam. Even when he became the Khalifa, they disobeyed him then. Second Imam struggled with people to follow him. Of course the third, fourth, fifth, all the way up till the 11th, when as you went on, people just more and more abandoned their Imam. They really lost their attachment. As you see throughout time, the Imam, his connection with Shia started to split. That's why you start to see towards the later Imams, 10th and 11th especially, the connection with the Shia was pulled away. Think about it, if our Imam was here, hopefully we would like to say that if somebody came and tried to put the Imam in jail, we would never let him do that. We would like to think that. But I'm sure people back then said the same thing. But they allowed the 9th and 10th and 7th, and they allowed them for the Abbasids to oppress them. So much dhulm happened then. People who said, we love you, then the question is, how could you let that happen?
Yeah.
So now, why wouldn't Allah take away this 12th Imam, put him in ghaibah? Because we can't handle Imamat yet. So right now, we're in a training process. This musibah, this bala, this trials politically which is going on is for us to learn to unite. The Imam said, the 12th Imam, one of his famous narrations that is attributed to him, it says that, if my Shia really want me to come back, all they do is one, obey Allah. We have to start practicing what we said we're going to practice. Keep away from what's haram, do what's wajib. But unite. Unite on what you should be uniting on. When we're going to be fractured in different little issues here and there, this is going to cause a problem. If simple, things like we can't unite on, then how can we expect to unite under the banner of the Imam? So when we can start doing that, then we'll be ready for the Imam. But when people are able to target and kill us, when they're able to harass us and beat us and torture us, then this shows that we don't value our honor and our dignity. And again, I'm not trying to say everybody stand up and fight. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'll get in trouble with the NSA for saying things like that in FBI. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's an izzat, there's a dignity and honor that we have to have. And that's what people start to show. For example, like all these different rallies that we have. This is what that shows. It shows solidarity and standing up for what we believe in. Alaikum salam.
Thank you very much, Maulana Hassan Rizvi. I greatly appreciate it. And inshallah, some other time we're going to have you in the studios. And once again, I would like to thank you for your time. And it's a great pleasure talking to you. I'm really impressed by the wisdom and the knowledge you have. Now we're going to take a short break, and we're going to continue with our program with Maulana Razi Jafar in Iran. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum.